It's like the wrong way around.
I can go ahead and I can, if you want to
We should have an intro music for our webinars, like in a podcast or something like that. We are doing this every month. We need this.
Yeah. We should have an Agile 42 song.
Yeah.
But for those who are coming in
Hello.
here into the webinar, feel free to go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat as well. You know, go ahead and get to know each other there in the chat. You're welcome to say hello to one another and, you know, just do brief introductions. Before we get started here, we'll get started in about a minute.
And don't forget to pick in the chat to host everyone, not only host and panelists, but pick everyone somewhere there, I guess. Hello, hello. Hello, South Africa. Hello, Canada. Hi,
Hello,
Illinois.
Illinois.
Good
All right,
morning.
we've come around to 10 o'clock here, and it looks like we got a good bunch of attendees here. So if we want to go ahead and get started, hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. Today's topic is happier workplaces, and it is presented today by our coaches, Regina Martins and Berga Karaman. So we're about to go ahead and get things officially started. Remember to please post your questions in the Q&A section, not in the chat window. Our coaches will be answering those questions in the second half of today's session. So to go ahead and get things started, I'll let our coaches make their introductions, and I'll step back here so that they can do that. Go ahead and take it away, guys.
I can start. Hello, good morning from and good afternoon from Berlin, as it's 4 o'clock in here. And hi, I'm Birge Kahraman. I'm an agile coach for many, many years, like 2010. I started my career in Istanbul and continue in Berlin, Germany. And yeah, it's me.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Regina Martins and been with Agile 42 since 2015. You can do the maths. Agile coach since about 2010 as well. And before that, project and program management. My background is really from big corporates. That's where I come from. So I know big corporates in South Africa very well. I'm based in South Africa, in Johannesburg.
So we welcome you. And for today's webinar, we have planned an intimate interview with each other. We are just going to talk about few things, our tips and tricks, our past experiences, our thoughts regarding to how to create like more happier, more human workplace. So there are few questions that we have prepared, and please, in the meantime, post your questions to Q&A. So when it's the right time, we can pick them and we can answer them as well. So shall we start, Regina? Are we ready? Are you ready? So
Yep, do it.
okay, so in our also promo and everything, we have mentioned something called quiet quitting. So what does quiet quitting mean to you? And have you ever observed this? Do you know why it is happening? So what is causing this quiet quitting?
Yeah, so quiet quitting is well, I've done quiet quitting myself in the past. I think many people have. And quiet quitting is when, from what I've experienced is and observed, is when people actually start checking out. They start checking out from the workplace. They start checking out from their jobs, and it's a bit of a state of limbo that people find themselves in, not really knowing what to do next. And thinking back to when I quietly quit, eventually I left. Eventually I ended up leaving the company. And I think there is two elements to quiet quitting. The one element is, what can the company do, right? Because people tend to leave, people don't leave companies, people leave leaders. So what can leaders do in order to ensure quiet quitting is something that doesn't happen? The other aspect is the individual, because, in as much as leaders can try to make a workplace a great workplace, if the person has decided to check out, then that's their accountability. They've decided to check out for some reason, right? So there needs to be some kind of accountability put on them as well to actually say, look, I'm not happy, or to just leave. I mean, that's the reality. No leader can take accountability for other people. People still need to take accountability for how they show up, for how they lean in, right? So it seems like a simple thing, but it's not. It's actually quite complex because it's multidimensional, as mentioned. Quiet quitting can manifest in many different ways. It manifests in just not participating, not talking in meetings, not feeling that because there's no sense of belonging from their side. They are just going with the flow, right? Not expressing opinions. And maybe there's an element of not feeling safe enough to do that. So psychological safety might play a role. So yeah, as mentioned, hugely complex, not a simple thing.
What is the biggest reason of quiet quitting, according to you? Like, why people do this first place?
Yeah, it's difficult to say what is the biggest reason, because there is no single biggest reason. People can vacillate between reasons as well. One day it's something else, another day it might be, they might be feeling in a different, differently. They might be feeling differently. So I'm not going to put my head on the block and say it's the single biggest reason is quiet quitting. Change is quite a big thing. When organizations are going through change, and that change is not being well contained or well handled, it can lead people to quietly quit as well. They're not moving forward with the change. And the other interesting thing is, talking about change, I subscribe to William Bridges's change model, or transitions, and he wrote the book called Transitions. And there's change, and change happens. It's a decision somebody makes. For example, the CEO decides, okay, we are now going to use Agile, we're going to go Scrum. The decision is made, the change has been made, right? And then people enter, and then because it's change, people tend to enter this psychological no man's land, is a bit of a gray area as they're navigating what this change can mean for them, for their careers, for their jobs, for their titles, for their salaries, for how they're going to work together, and in a sense, their organizational identity. And when people move through the change and make it on the other side, that's when the transition is done. And in that psychological no man's land, that gray area, people can actually start quietly quitting and eventually leave before they make it through to the other side.
I totally agree with you with the gray area part, because it's usually like, as a humankind, we don't like these uncertainties. We don't like not knowing what is going to happen or what is going to affect us. And I can also totally agree with you. Those gray areas, maybe not the biggest reason, but one of the reasons that people started to quietly quitting.
Yeah, that uncertainty, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Birgo, another word that's been floating around recently as well, and I've been reading up about it, is resenteeism. And I hope that I'm pronouncing it well or properly. So, how do you think resenteeism impacts employee morale and productivity? And what can be done to address it?
I think this is one level higher than quiet quitting, because as the new terminology, I think it's pop up in 2022 or even early 2023, resenteeism, and I hope also I'm pronouncing it correctly, means that being vocal about this, like not being happy at the workplace. So and it's about, like, talking about why you are not happy, what is going wrong, etc. But the downside of this is it's not a constructive approach. It's only complaining and talking about the negative stuff. And at the end, unfortunately, it also turns out in some cases that it's a negativity, like, all this negative vibes coming from the singular or like a group of employees. Although it's sometimes a cry for help or change, sometimes it's only, like, a demotivator for the rest of the employees. So at the end, I think it's also related quietly to understand the reason why, and approaching this resenteeism or resenteeist employees, I will say, to try to understand them, to put some empathy over there and see why this is happening, what they are mentioning, what they are complaining about. And I think, as you have mentioned, also for quiet quitting, there are two sides of the coin. One side is also related with the employee itself. And the second part is more on the management, on the leadership, on the company side. So although those new terms are popping up, I think most of the things are familiar to us. Like, we are also familiar with some colleagues or employees who are complaining all the time. And throughout my career, I've seen it a lot. And I always take this with a grain of salt. So I see them like the jokers in the palace, like in the old times. They are, like, mocking and pointing out the wrong stuff. And sometimes you have to take this criticism with like cautiously, because sometimes it has a truth in it. So, and this truth may help you to pinpoint the stuff which is not working in your company, and come up with some change ideas or initiatives that will make things easier for everyone. But on the other hand, also, if this employee is starting to become toxic, refusing to change, refusing to contributing for those change initiatives, then I think there might be other steps that you can take, like, and it's up to the company, it's up to the environment, up to how employees are feeling safe or not. Because, for example, gossiping is also a form of resenteeism, which is not a constructive or nice form of it. And it's also one of the conflict reasons.
Yeah, and that lacks transparency and probably safety in the workplace. So what could be an antidote as such
I think
for that?
Yeah, one thing is definitely having an open and honest conversation between the all parties. It's not only the employees, but between the employees, colleagues, team members, managers, HR, like, whomever is involved on those topics. Communication and open communication, honest communication lies in the, like, basis of everything, if you ask to me. And if the company has an improvement culture, if the company has the culture of giving feedback and recognition, it's way more easier. If you don't have them, I think it's worth to spend some time to establish those basics within the company before addressing every individual problem. I think it's important to create this environment where people can give and get feedback, get recognition, and be encouraged to have this continuous improvement. And I think this will change the mindset more than complaining, in order to coming up with change initiatives and providing the ownership as well. So you can also bring those, I would say, negative employees in a more positive format. It's always like how you approach the situation. You can approach this with anger, or you can approach this with constructive feelings and providing this environment.
Yeah.
And by saying that, I would like to change the topic a little bit towards the generations. So all those new terminologies and new, even TikTok movements are popping up in the Generation Z. And what Generation Z actually wants, how the younger generation is seeing all those work environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a favorite question of mine, and it's about paradigms, by the way, and change at the paradigm level is the most fundamental change that humanity can make. And it's change that takes time to get there, right? And we are really not really at the cusp. We are over the cusp of a paradigm change around how we work. Think back to, I don't want to generalize, but think back to like our parents. When they went to work for a company, and they stayed with that company for 50 years before they got the golden watch, and they retired, right? And then when I started working, I was in between that and this new way. This was in the 90s. So, and I mean, I've always changed jobs because I get bored. So the whole concept of working for a company, going into an office, the whole 9 to 5, kowtowing to the boss, for example, having performance reviews that are controlled by somebody else, being told what to do, is quite an old-fashioned way of working. And it's the old notion of the organization is a machine and people are just cogs in this machine to produce outputs. And things are changing. We know things are changing. We are at the forefront of, facilitating that change in organizations is what we do. And agile is a paradigm. It's a new paradigm. And it takes years for paradigms to change. So we're really at the forefront of this. And it's changing organizations. Really. And I think instead of focusing on the millennials or the Generation Zs, which are only now coming into the workplace, and focusing on them and what they are supposedly not doing, is let's focus on our organizations. Let's focus on changing the organizations, not just for the new people entering the market, but also people who've been in that organization for a while already. And let's focus on that. And I really like Andrea's, the organic agility. Our organizations it's organic. It needs to change. It needs to shift. I mean, we are in a fast-moving world. Black swans are coming all the time. Look at the 2008 crash. We couldn't have predicted when it was going to happen. We knew something was going to happen at some point, but when, we didn't know. The scientists had been warning about a pandemic for decades. It happened. We knew it was coming. We didn't know when it was coming. All of these things are happening, but we don't know when they're going to happen. And we need to really make our organizations resilient. And it's not by having this machine that is going to break. I mean, look what happened to the Titanic, right? It kind of like crashed into the iceberg, right? It sank and killed a lot of people in the process. So it's how to make organizations resilient to change, and that can embrace the diversity of people that are coming into the market, because it's not just about the generations, it's about the whole diversity of people we have coming into our countries, for example. And I think that is key. Let's focus on that.
Yeah, it's great. And you made me think about like the organizations, and we usually say we want to be more organic, and organic means actually it comes with lots of analogies as well. If you became organic, you can heal yourself and you can include yourself, you can change yourself. But if you're a machine, like working like a machine, especially a big, like, Titanic, like big machine, it's very hard to pivot. And also, like you have mentioned, COVID hit, and there were lots of agile transformations actually happening because it's pushed people to transition, to change. And most of the companies, especially the companies or organizations that we are working with, who are already prone to this resilience and flexibility, had way more success during the COVID times, working from home, adapting to the new thing of new form of working, way more easier compared to that. And which also brings us, like, to maybe another question, like along with the resilience and flexibility, so what other factors can contribute for a more healthier, more productive, more resilient workplace?
Yeah. So, I mean, let's talk about the pyramid of results. And I know a lot of people in the call probably don't know about the pyramid of results, but it's something that we use in our coaching. And at the bottom of the pyramid, below the waterline, we've got things which are culture, is part of the organizational culture, and you can't see them, you can feel them, for example. And how do we as leaders and coaches facilitate the creation of pockets of time and space where people can just be, and how do we facilitate that? So it's really the behavior level. So we facilitate and we help people change behavior, then other things will fall into place. And it's not about forcing people to change behavior. I mean, let's take what's happening currently. We work from home for close on 3 years, and now organizations are saying, no, you now must come back to the office. Okay. If I worked for an organization like that, I would probably be resisting going back to the office. And that is quite a big thing. It's not trying to, I mean, let's take going back to the office. I don't think people are resisting going back to the office per se. I think people are resisting how they are being told they need to return to the office. And the craziest thing is that people are told you need to come into the office for 3 days, and it needs to be these 3 days. All right. And then people go to the office and they sit at their desks and they put their headphones on and get onto Zoom or Teams or whatever. What's the point of going into the office if the rest of your team is actually still at home, because it's not their day to go in? So it's around playing around with the constraints and not mandating and not telling everybody, okay, you now have to come into the office 3 days a week and it needs to be Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but rather saying, people, we have offices, so how about we, spend some time in the office, maybe come in when you need to do your rituals, your retrospectives, your planning. Maybe you need to do some user story mapping, which requires the change, the space you have in your office, and give people the choice about that, which is, the experiences at the bottom there that you see in the pyramid of results. So it takes leaders to actually acknowledge that they play a huge role in facilitating that. So how do you create those experiences? So somebody has a wonderful experience of going into the office because I'm going to meet my team and we're going to do some user story mapping, versus, oh my word, I now have to get into the traffic so that I have to go into the office because I have to go into the office for 3 days a week. You can tell this is a bit of a soapbox for me, right?
Yes, and yeah, you are right. Like, over there, the parameter of results is something that we usually use when we start with the companies, and we say that if you want to lead people, not manage people, you have to create some experiences through the habits or rituals, through the behaviors, through the why. And if you can do this, things will be way more easier, coming up with more stronger results. Otherwise, you always have to manage actions on top of actions on top of actions, decisions. And it's also a huge workload for the rest of the management team, because leading is different than managing. And I think we can also share this later. But if you want to just Google it, Google as pyramid of results, and you are going to see something like that.
So, I want to ask you a question, Birger, and it is somewhat related and hopefully not too repetitive to what we've been talking about. Is how can we move beyond the traditional controlling boss versus lazy employee dynamic that might be pervading some organizations, and what is the role of Agile in facilitating that?
Over there, I think it's also important to describe what is lazy employee, what is controlling manager. So in the first glance, it looks like, very harsh sounding, but at the end of the day, it's also an empathy and communication topic. So what do we mean? And if we are talking about as lazy employee from the eyes of the manager, what they are looking for. So, and in order to prevent this, there should be a conversation between the employee and the manager. And also the opposite, if you are seeing that your manager is controlling, so what does it mean? And it's sometimes not only between the manager and employee or subordinate, it's sometimes in the company level. So if you have sorted this out, and if you have some main agreements, I think it may also even resolve in some level those discussions. But when we come back to more the controlling part of the sites, then we should be also looking at, again, remember the pyramid, and down below there is the company culture as well. Sometimes the companies are pushed or somehow evolved in this controlling mechanisms because they are trying to be very efficient. They are trying to have this very controlled stuff for higher quality, for efficiency, for optimizing every processes inside, and it's ending up controlling. And at the end, I think one of the biggest understanding over there is how we can move from this controlling behavior to the behavior that our company needs or our company culture needs. Because in some cases, I think it's important to also realize where you are in the market and what your employees are asking, and go towards there. And I don't know if Regina is not with us anymore, or is it my connection? And I think it's Regina, but I can continue, or maybe yeah, is it me? It's Regina. Say something. Regina is gone. Okay, but Regina is back. Okay, sorry for this
Load
hiccup.
shedding. Load
I think,
shedding.
yeah, the reality of South Africa hit Regina a bit. Yeah, Regina quietly quit. No, she never does this. Okay, so yeah, long story in short, the controlling behavior, I was talking about the controlling behavior and how it was related with the company culture, and how it should be shift towards something else depending on the needs of the company and the needs of the employers. And this is something we call cultural coherence. And we see that the most successful companies are the coherent companies. So, and in some cases, actually controlling behavior is required. For example, in a crisis modus, like if there is a fire, you need somebody to command and control the situation and take you out of the building. And it's also again situational. But when we come back to this like controlling manager versus lazy employee, I think my short answer is please define those topics, define those terms, and try to put like a little bit effort on those like underlying issues. Why it's a lazy employee, or why do you think your manager is controlling? Is it company or is it the manager? Can you give feedback to each other or not? Can you get, I don't know, support or coaching from the others or not? So this will be my short answer after this hiccup.
Yeah. Somewhat related to that, I want to share a story of servant leadership. And I think that's probably something that's coming up a little bit later. I worked for a bank for many years, and it was just before I came to Agile 42. And I worked for this awesome leader, and he was development manager for a few teams, and of which I was the scrum master for the one team, and I reported into the development manager. And when I started working in his team, we had our one-on-ones every month. And we used to go into a room. It was pre-COVID, of course. We used to go into a little meeting room. We used to sit down, and then he used to sit down, look at me, and say, "How are you, Regina? How are you doing?" And the first few times I was a little bit at a loss. I was gobsmacked, why he's asking me how I am. I've never had this before. This is so weird. I'm expecting to go into one-on-one meeting with the boss and expect him to tell me what to do, and how are things going. And we had a one-on-one that was mostly me speaking, him listening, and we got stuff done. Eventually I realized then I did my Scrum Master course, and I became hopefully a better Scrum Master, and I realized that's what he's doing. He's a servant leader, and he's a natural one. And I wonder if that could also be something that could make a difference in how people are perceived to be so-called lazy.
Yeah, it's also like great point. And active listening is also one of the like important part of a healthy communication. And I think I'm going to say this maybe 2 or 3 times more, but having this healthy open communication, I think this is one of the golden keys of being happy in the workplace. But on the other side, I see also, for example, having a purpose is very important for, and also communicating the purpose to the employees. And it's also something that motivates people, engages people, and also prevents this quiet quitting or resenteeism at the same time, because they have something that they can hold on to, they can communicate, they can work through, like those shared goals. What else do you see, Regina? Like in order to create like, successful, happy workplaces, companies, leaders, what are the like, things that people are applying to create those environments?
Yeah, I want to reiterate a little bit something you mentioned, which is goals. Goals are important, and not just people's individual goals or the goals for what they would like to achieve. It's what is the team goal? What is the organizational goal? Yes, there's a vision and there are goals. And in South Africa, in Agile, Agile for South Africa, we use Scrum and we've got sprint goals. We've got the annual goal, which is consistent with the Agile 42 Global's goal, and we've got our sprint goals. And sometimes we just don't reach the goal fully, and other times we do, and we kind of exceed, and we kind of surprise ourselves in the process. And having those goals is very important, because it kind of holds together what people do. Helps people focus on an outcome, and then allied to that is informing the work that gets done. Everyone is working towards these goals, and not trying to do too many things at the same time, not being pushed and told you have to do more, for example, because that's very much an outputs kind of mindset. So it's focusing on those goals. And even if teams don't have goals, or maybe you feel that you can't have perfect goals, it doesn't matter. You just focus on something as a team. Agree, we are going to focus on this in the next sprint or in the next month if you're not working using sprints, and help people come together around that.
Yeah, it's also scientifically proven that achieving those goals is helping you to produce oxytocin, which is one of the hormones that will coming up with this sense of achievement, and it's also keeps you going. And in that regard, defining those goals reachable but still aspirational, as we say in the OKRs, is very important. Yeah. And also helping people to be more engaged with the work. And by speaking that, I see there is a conversation going on in the chat about corporate culture is being so rigid and containing a few micro cultures and departments, and it's not one size fits all. And I also totally agree with that. I think it's also, I'm going to bring something more. It's also related with the managers or leaders and having this situational awareness, being able to judge topics or the employees in a certain context. And in order to do this, I think first of all, empathy is very important, being able to understand what is happening around you, what is happening with your employees. And I think your example also contains the secret question: how are you really doing? And asking this and really listening, creating this empathy. And also something that we speak a lot in our trainings for agile coaches, it's emotional intelligence is very important. And it's something not just that you have born with, but it's a capability, it's a skill that you can grow on. And I think it's also very important in terms of having a more humanized workplace, investing on those growing this soft skills, this empathy, investing on the emotional intelligence is very important.
Yeah. It reminds me of a story that the late Professor Samantha Grashal often told. He did a lot of culture work with companies, and he came to the one bank that I worked at and helped shape that culture. And he was born in Delhi in India, and I think he moved to Switzerland, with his family professionally, and or I think France. Gosh, I'm getting the facts wrong. But anyway, he moved out of India into a European country, and he used to go and visit his family in Delhi in the middle of summer. And he really battled, because he said, Delhi just felt so closed and oppressive and hot. I couldn't breathe. I actually didn't enjoy going there. And then he went home, and he tells a story of visiting Fontainebleau forest. And the moment he stepped into that forest, he just felt like running and jumping, and skipping and laughing, because that's what that environment inspired him to do. And you talked about oxytocin and the hormones. So it's a lot. It's about the experiences and leaders. What do you want to your people to say about the culture? Do you want people to complain about the rigid culture, or do you want people to go to work and be happy, be skip and jump, not because you are providing free coffee or free this or pool tables? I mean, all of that is just window dressing, because you can have as many pool tables and free drinks on a Friday, and people are still not going to be happy, right? So it's the smell of the place. You often talked about the smell of the place. So when people step in, either a Teams call or going to the office, what is the smell of the place? And is it making them wanting to skip and jump and work the hardest that they can, or are they feeling oppressive and feeling like they can't breathe and they're suffocating?
Yeah. It also reminded me something long time ago. I think it was 2013 or 14. I had a webinar about love-driven development, and I was talking about like how we have to cherish our developers. I was Scrum Master back then, and how we have to invest in their well-being and also like mental health in order to have successful and productive teams, because it's also, I think, a part of the diversity and inclusion, including everyone in a most well way into the workplace. Because if you invest them, if you show them you are also part of the team, you are understanding them, it's going to come back to you with a multiplied productivity, I would say, or effectiveness, because people feeling well, people feeling happy will be contributing more. They will be more creative. They will do a little bit more than they have to do, because they want to contribute and be in. And I think it's also very important to keep in mind that it's very easy to fire and hire people, but at the end your culture changes, your people change, your productivity decreases, and onboarding a new employee is taking between 6 months and a year, if we are talking with the numbers and facts. And everyone who is leaving will take out something from the company and company culture. Whether it's a good thing or bad thing, it's up to you to discuss. But this is also a fact that we have to keep in mind, I guess.
Yeah. Just checking the time. It's 16:41, so Central European time, and I'm just wondering if we should go to the questions.
We definitely do have some questions that have come in here.
Yeah.
I know that we've got at least one participant who sent us in a trio of questions.
Yeah.
So I can go ahead and put those into our panelist chat for you here. I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste them so that you can see them, and I'll go ahead and I'll read these in order. So the person who had put in the question starts off with the question that instead of post-exit interviews, why not pre-exit interviews in terms of quiet quitting? Why wait until post-exit, which is then followed up with why not ask people what they want? It might just work. No Carl Jung needed, just listening. Would this work? And then the last question that was a part of it was, how could we create an environment for the typical employee? It has to be fun, right? So those all came from one participant, and I figured those would probably be a good place to start.
Oh,
I know it's a lot to unpack.
Shall I can start with the pre-exit versus post-exit interviews. Yes, you are right, and I'm seeing that many of the companies are trying to do so within the like different forms of employee surveys or trying to have this mood check or pulse check with the employees time to time. And some companies are really investing some time and money in order to analyze what they really want. And I see this more and more in the companies, but unfortunately, not every company. If your company or organization is not doing this, as a manager, you can do this with your team, for example, time to time, bringing them together either in one-on-ones or in an anonymized way, asking them what they need, what they want to do. It's also retrospectives. If you have Scrum teams, it's also a very good way to do this, asking them what they need, what they like, what they don't like, because I think it's also important to continue whatever we are doing right and acknowledging this and recognizing this and celebrating those achievements is also important, because sometimes we are just fixed on the stuff going wrong or bad and it turns off complaining contest. But actually retrospectives or those type of surveys or interviews are also a very good way to collect data on what we are doing right or well and how we can continue with this. And another thing that I can tell is also in some companies there are fireside chats. You can also have a fireside chat with your colleagues, teams. When I was working in one of the companies, e-learning companies, I was also a team lead and I had a team, and we had special feedback sessions to me and to team. It was run by another colleague, not by me, not any of us, because all of us were agile coaches. And we were giving each other feedback on what we can improve on. And it was very how can I say, constructive and also preventive, instead of asking people okay, why you are leaving or what annoyed you most. I think having this regular check-ins is a better way to do this. Regina, what do you think?
Yeah, that's it's a new concept for me, pre-exit interviews, and it sounds like something to be implemented, most definitely, right? And another part of the question, I think it might have been the second question, is around listening. So, Bert, can you just repeat that question around listening?
Yes. It was stated that people could just ask what they want, and that might just work. No Carl Jung would be needed, just listening. Would that work?
Yeah. Who doesn't like to be listened to without being interrupted? And quite often, listening is also how some people tend to think as well. So when things are a little bit muddled and fuzzy up here in the brain, there's nothing like sitting down with someone and saying, I just need you to listen. Don't want you to answer. I just need you to listen. And so that's the one aspect of listening. The other aspect of listening is when leaders listen to their team, to their people, rather than not listening, rather than operating very much on a transactional rather than transformational basis. And listening is one of the values, or one of the characteristics of servant leadership. I think it's the one that is right at the top. I don't think it's on purpose, but it's the one that immediately catches the eye. It's being able to listen, and listen actively, listen with your whole body, listen with all the senses, so people feel they are being listened to. And I wonder, and I always, when I teach servant leadership in my certified Scrum Master courses, I always say, I wonder if, yes, there's 10 virtues of servant leadership, but I wonder if you just take the first one, which is listening, and you just spend 1 week, just 1 week, try it for 1 week. All you do is listen. You don't do anything else with your team. All you do is listen. I wonder what will change in the process.
It's listening plus hearing out at the same time.
And then there was the last part of the question, which was how could we create an environment for the typical employee? It has to be fun, right?
I partially disagree with the fun part. Like, sometimes it's more than fun. Of course, we want to have fun. We don't want to have cry. But I imagine people who are working in the emergency rooms, for example, in hospitals, they work. I don't think it's fun, but it's very valuable. It's very purposeful. And I think it's one of the things that we should be able to provide them, like having the meaning, having the perfect purpose, as we have discussed earlier, and having like right goals, listening them, creating this environment that they can feel safe, trust, and being able to productive and creative without being judged. Of course, inside the frame of the respect and like some humanly boundaries, but I wouldn't say it has to be only fun.
Yeah, I like what you said about purposeful. And it's I know it's probably been said before, and it's around if you enjoy your job, you never have to go to work, or something like that. And in a way, if you enjoy the job, enjoy what you're doing, enjoy the people you're working with, the environment that you're doing your work in, then there is a feeling of, yeah, I'm going to work and I want to be there, right? Whether it's virtual, whether it's in person, doesn't matter. And feeling that you have a role to play, feeling you know why you are there, why your role specifically is important, why you specifically are needed in that team.
Yeah, there is a comment in the chat. Let's replace fun with motivating. Thumbs up.
Yeah.
And I think the last of the questions that we had that came up, and this was towards the last topic that you guys were talking about. I believe goals had come up. Someone had asked the question, what are some of the ways in which goals can be misused or used badly?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Sure, that's really making me think there.
I think one of the things popping in my mind is putting very easy or not challenging goals, or goals which are not aligned with the rest of the company or rest of the strategy. Those are the two things popping up, but can you also define what you mean by badly? Maybe we can also come up with further answers to that.
Yeah, what and while that question maybe has been clarified in the chat, I'm just wondering if perhaps it's got something to do with how goals are measured and how performance towards goals are measured as well, or tracked, monitored and tracked. And that's something that can actually lead goals to be meaningless, for example, where it's the goal is too rigid, and the goal is not necessarily co-created. It's just something which someone comes up with, the leader, the team leader, and says, this is the goal, now go and do. And the team has no input into the goal. They just have to do. And that's, I think, a goal that can be misused because people are going to try their best. And if that's going to be used to monitor or manage their performance, then they are going to game the system, right? Which kind of makes the goal a bit of an empty goal. So there's an art to goal setting. I mean, Iberica is our resident expert there. And I think there might be something there as well. Yeah.
And we have the clarification for the bad goal definition. I was thinking specifically about using goals as KPIs, and over there I can jump with OKRs. For example, in the OKR setting, one of the misused things is using OKRs for performance management, for example, or also using those KPIs to punish or reward people. Of course, KPIs are important. It should be KPI, like, key performance indicator. One or two things will show up in your dashboard all the time and showing that your company, your organization, your product, your service, whatever you have the KPI is about, is up and running and doing the right thing. And technically, this is everybody's game, keeping those KPIs up, and it's like being at the same boat. So you want to have a boat which is not leaking, everything is going well. But with the goals, especially in the OKR context, what we are trying to do is improve the company, improve the organization, and creating a upward movement towards the better days, towards a better change. And it's also a team game. And this is also something that we have to keep in mind while defining those goals. So how can we make internally or externally our work better?
Yeah, I like that.
Okay, I can talk about OKRs like, forever. So just keep me. Any goal which is not smart might be bad goal. Yes.
Yeah. It still works. An
Yeah.
oldie but a goodie.
Specific, measurable, attainable, related, timely. Any more questions before we close up and ask our question to you?
Looking in
One
the
more
Q&As.
question.
Looking in the Q&As here. I haven't seen anything that's come up here.
Okay. Then our question to you, and in your view, like, we spent this 55 minutes together. What is the most significant takeaway or action point that you have from today's webinar that you can implement in your workplace? And chat is yours. What is the most significant takeaway or action point from today's webinar that you can implement in your workplace?
There we go. We've got some answers coming in now.
Yes.
Yeah, listening's coming up quite a bit.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, change done badly. You're not taking people on the journey. Yeah.
Pyramid of results.
Nice.
Thank you all. Thank you,
Yeah.
Rachel. Thank you, Bert. Thank you, Ernst, for behind the scenes, managing all
Yes.
that and everything.
And also,
Thank
before we go ahead and wrap things up here, we also wanted to mention that for the attendees and the folks who came out to hear the presentation today, we do also have a offer for the attendees for 40% off of our soft skills courses. If you go ahead and you check out the offer on the screen there, it will also be in the chat. Feel free to go ahead and grab that information via QR code or the link that you'll see in the chat. and to go ahead onto the online store to go ahead and redeem those. You're welcome to go ahead and use that offer. So thank you again for attending our course today. And thank you, Regina and Berga, for your presentation today. We're very glad to have seen everybody today, and thank you for attending.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Be awesome.